Hi there folks, I'm the Complex Games Apologist, and today I'm going to introduce you to the campaign setting that has been the most meaningful to me throughout my career in the tabletop hobby, and one that even as I create my own setting content and my own adventures, it's something that I return to, something where the deep interconnectedness and also the modularity, my ability to pick and choose parts of it to weave into my stories, is what really makes it work. Anytime that I don't understand how something works, I can look to the real world, and it's a place where I can create content just using my own knowledge of medievalism, and where fantasy is the thing that I am challenged to invent, and all the other challenges melt away. I'm talking to you about this beautiful subcontinent at the edge of the world. Things come in, but very few things leave. Hârn is a place of mystery. It's called the Misty Isle. Would you believe it? It's on the western edge of a great continent with a storied history of empire. It is a place where 7 kingdoms abide amongst wilderness and barbarians, amongst orcs and lost civilizations, where elves and dwarves are fading, and where magic is kept hidden from public view, and yet is always looming, always controlling things behind the scenes. Let's talk about Harn today, folks. Let's go deep.
Every time we go to a new world, and my heart pounds.
Every campaign setting has a gimmick, right? In Harn, the initial gimmick is bread on the table. That everything eats, and everything needs a reason for it to interact.
It is a medieval setting, which some people describe as preoccupied with medieval realism. However, I would describe it as cognizant of economy. And in its approach, it has a checklist of everything that is important to fantasy. Elves, dwarves, monsters, knights, castles, damsels, magic, long journeys, barbarians. Each of these is acknowledged in turn and incorporated into the setting.
There's enough space on this huge continent for these 7 kingdoms to endure, and for the elves and the dwarves to hide in a corner, and for the various barbarian tribes to either struggle to exist, to war with one another, to raid civilization, to exist nobly in abundance, or perhaps face a grim extinction in the face of civilization. And each of these 7 kingdoms has its own space to develop an identity. It has a future of expansion and trade, or perhaps a decline from internal struggle. Because the setting is right-sized, as I would describe it, that it consults with economics, and it pays heed to the grim truth that in order for there to be knights, there needs to be serfs. What we get is something that lives and breathes, that is as beautiful and real as Westeros, and yet is unfamiliar to us at first glance. It's some place where you can explore, where the prejudices of your players, having watched tons of Game of Thrones, are not going to come into the game and to interject their own assumptions. You're all going to discover it together. Because that's the beauty, I think, of adventurers, of adventure modules, is that everyone's looking at it with fresh eyes. Even though it's on paper and it's set in stone, it's not. You have the power to rearrange the dungeon, you have the power to change up NPCs, and ultimately you have the power to make those NPCs associate in new ways with your players. They are going to set themselves off on a trajectory, and they're going to change the world, and the world is going to change them.
So let's take a moment to talk about what Harn is, as a product and as a place. As a product, it's presented as a series of encyclopedia articles with a core document called the Harn Dex, which outlines history and gives basic articles for the most important places and people.
For example, there's an article all about, say, the Keep of Kaiban, where one of the earls of the Kingdom of Caldor has his seat. And it talks all about the important NPCs. It gives you a detailed layout of the keep and the town, so that if your players are going to do something not unlike Thief the Dark Project and infiltrate that castle, you've got all the information that you need. If your players are going to do something maybe like the other Boleyn girl or the Tudors, you also can use that same material. And if your players are simply perhaps gearing up on a supply run to go across the mountains into the dwarven kingdom of Azadmir, they can also do that. everything's there in an article about Harn.
Interoperability, the modularity of it, that you can pick and choose, that you can subtract, the deep interconnectedness. That's what's really important.
The beautiful thing is that the fan community, which is full of people who really want to get right the core ethos of this setting, which reaches back to a copyright date of 1983, this fan community is constantly adding to it at a website called lethia.com. And here's where I'm going to start butchering pronunciations.
One of the principles of the core ethos of Harn is to acknowledge everything that's been written before and to add to it meaningfully, or to provide an enhanced detail. Now, detail could seem intimidating, but because of the encyclopedia format, you can modularize Harn. You can take pieces of it into your own world, or you can only acknowledge parts of it while brainstorming or homebrewing your own. And because there's that micro-level detail of the layouts of castles, where every shop is located in town, and even the tax rolls of a feudal manor, what that comes down to is that anywhere where Harn isn't, you can construct your own picture of what it is through the verisimilitude of what's extant in the setting.
When for the first time we sat down where no one had ever been before, that didn't look the least bit exotic. That said to me something about the commonality of processes, about other worlds having some similarity to our own.
So, what is the fun part of Harn? The fun part is how all these fantasy elements coexist, they abide, and because there's this deep verisimilitude, there's this deep understanding of why things happen, that if you turn through the pages you can see it, it means that you can project very easily what will happen next as a game master, using your creativity, and when that fails, you can go to psychohistory in the Harry Seldon sense. It's gorgeous. We'll unravel each of the 7 kingdoms in the next episode. I think that this is the real reason to unpack Harn from its halcyon beginnings. It's as old as I am. And that's because right now, a touchstone for us is a very low fantasy, cause and effect, real, steeped in history world called Westeros, called the Song of Ice and Fire. And rather than play in that world, I would say to you, why not unpack a new one where you as the game master can communicate everything. You won't be getting things wrong, your players can forge new roads and not upset the stories that are yet to be told, that you won't have to worry about getting everything right, but you will have the ability to feel like there's a deep resource for getting things right when you want to. So thank you for setting out on this journey with me to the Misty Isle, this place of vast landscapes, and a wonder that I hadn't experienced since I cracked my first fantasy novel as a child. The first time that you went to Middle-earth, the first time that you went to Narnia, I think that's the promise that Harn holds. It has the vastness to accommodate 5 unruly players and a game master struggling to brainstorm and keep up with them. It has the vastness of information and the human soul that we've all discovered as adults. It has struggle and vice, evil and good, and ultimately just hunger, because everything eats, and everything longs for wealth. And that's the beauty that Harn has. It's grown up. It's as old as I am. It was born in 1983. Let's go.
The advantages that accrue are largely long-term advantages.
Long-term meaning over the next
Meaning
100
over a
years,
period
200
of,
years?
no, even just decades.
Right.
To say, let the long term take care of itself. It's very important, of course, to plan things in the short term, but we have to have a mix. Every great society does that. And it's always so tempting to say, let the long term take care of itself. I get reelected on the basis of what I do in the short term. And that is extremely dangerous.
People say, well, your characters are only going to do it once. Your players are only going to see this stuff once, and to them it's all going to be fresh and new, and they're going to have their minds blown regardless. That may be true, but what happens when things take an unexpected turn? What adventure content does for you is it gives you this vast reserve of believability for when your players exercise their agency and do something that you weren't expecting.